It started with a Virginia Slim's butt buried in a fern and ended with me burning down a prestigious Hampton dynasty using a 12-minute video. My mother-in-law thought she could use smoke to poison my son's lungs and money to force me out of this marriage. But she forgot one thing. I am a documentary filmmaker, and I know exactly how to frame a villain so they look their absolute worst under the spotlight. My name is Mallory. I am 32 years old, and until 4 months ago, I was a respected documentary filmmaker known for my ability to capture the raw, unfiltered truth of human existence. Now, however, inside the gilded cage of my husband's family estate in East Hampton, I was being treated like a fragile, hallucinating invalid. The transition from director to emotional new mother had been swift and brutal, orchestrated entirely by the two people who were supposed to protect me. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked into the nursery to check on Leo, my 4-month-old son, and the air hit me like a physical slap. It was not the scent of baby powder or lavender lotion. It was the sharp, acrid stench of stale menthol tobacco. The smell was so thick it seemed to hang in the sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains. Panic seized my chest, not just because smoke increases the risk of SIDS, but because I had explicitly banned smoking anywhere near the house. I found Constance in the solarium, arranging hydrangeas with the terrifying precision of a surgeon. At 62, my mother-in-law was a monument to Hampton's high society, all stiff hair and passive-aggressive grace. "Constance," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage, "there is smoke in the nursery. Did you go in there?" She did not even look up from her flowers. "Oh, Mallory. You really are becoming quite tiresome with these accusations. I have been out here all afternoon. I can smell it. Constance. It smells like Virginia Slims. It smells like you." She finally turned, her eyes filled with a pity that felt more like contempt. "My dear, we have talked about this. Your hormones are still adjusting. You are smelling things that aren't there. It is a symptom of your condition." She made postpartum depression sound like a moral failing rather than a medical reality. I wanted to scream, but I knew that would only validate her narrative. When Preston came home that evening, I expected support. I needed support. Preston was 34, the CEO of Vantage Point Logistics, a man who solved complex supply chain issues for a living. Surely he could solve the issue of his mother poisoning our child. Instead, he loosened his tie and looked at me with weary eyes. "Mal, please, I've had a hell of a day. Mom says she wasn't near the room. You haven't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. It is. It's clearly just your mind playing tricks on you." "I am not crazy." "Preston," I snapped, "come with me." I dragged him to the potted fern in the corner of the hallway, right outside the nursery door. I dug my fingers into the soil, ruining my manicure, until I felt the filter. I pulled it out, a crushed cigarette butt, stained with the exact shade of coral lipstick Constance wore. "Look at this," I demanded, holding the evidence under his nose. Preston barely glanced at it. He sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "That is probably from the gardener. He was trimming the indoor plants the other day. The air left my lungs." The gardener. "Manuel quit 2 days ago. Preston. This bud is fresh. The ash is still loose. Maybe he came back to pick up a check? Look, I don't know. Mallory, stop looking for fights where there aren't any. You are exhausting." He walked away. He walked away from me, from the evidence, and from the safety of our son. That was the moment the fog of my exhaustion cleared. It was not just the smoke. It was the way Preston had been coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. It was the way Constance smirked when she thought I wasn't looking. They were not just dismissing me. They were erasing me. I realized then that arguing was useless. I was a director, and in my line of work, hearsay meant nothing. Only footage mattered. If they wanted to treat me like a crazy woman, fine. I would play the part. But behind the scenes, I was going to do what I did best. I went into the guest bathroom and locked the door. I pulled out my phone and opened a browser in incognito mode. I did not search for marriage counselors or lung specialists. I searched for spy equipment. I ordered a high-definition micro camera disguised as a working HEPA air purifier and another hidden inside the glass eye of a teddy bear. "You want a show?" I whispered to the empty room. "I will direct one hell of a masterpiece." I told Preston I was going to a spa for the afternoon to treat my nerves. I lied. I drove 2 towns over, parked at a nondescript cafe, and opened my laptop to access the live feed from the hidden cameras I had installed only 24 hours prior. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, expecting to catch Constance perhaps sneaking a puff near a window or rummaging through my drawers. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. Constance was in the nursery. She did not just smoke near the window. She stood directly over the crib where my 4-month-old son, Leo, lay sleeping. She lit a long, slender cigarette, inhaled deeply, and blew a thick gray cloud right into the air above his head. She looked at my son, not with grandmotherly love, but with the detached annoyance one might have for a piece of luggage. She tapped her phone screen and put it on speaker. The name, Serafina, flashed clearly on the high-definition feed. I know, Constance said, her voice tinny through my headphones. But you must just be patient, my love. We cannot rush this part. A younger, sultry voice laughed on the other end. I am tired of waiting. Connie, Preston promised we would be together by summer. I have the Maldives trip booked. Remember, Constance took another drag, ash falling dangerously close to the crib bumper. Just be patient, darling. When the boy is weaned, I will testify that Mallory is mentally unstable. We need that diagnosis to ensure Preston gets full custody. If we push her out too soon, the courts might favor the mother. But if we prove she is a danger to the child, well, then Leo is ours. And Preston is yours. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. This was not just a bad mother-in-law. This was a conspiracy. Then the door opened. Preston walked in. My heart hammered against my ribs. See the smoke, I begged silently. Smell it. Scream at her. Protect your son. Preston did none of those things. He walked through the haze of smoke as if it were fresh mountain air. He walked right up to his mother, kissed her on the cheek, and then leaned down toward the phone. Hey, baby, Preston said, his voice sickeningly sweet. I miss you. I miss you too. Handsome. Serafina purred. Your mother is telling me to be a good girl and wait. Mom is right, Preston said, glancing at my sleeping son with zero emotion. We have to stick to the plan. After the big party, when we have everyone on our side, we make the move. I will trigger the clause in the prenup about mental incapacity. She will leave with nothing but the clothes on her back. The screen of my laptop blurred, but not because of tears. My vision was sharpening. The pieces fell into place with a jagged, painful click. Serafina was not just a mistress. She was the daughter of the Vantage Point Board chairman, Constance's best friend. She was the chosen wife. The blue-blooded merge Constance had always wanted. I was just the incubator they had needed to produce an heir because Serafina reportedly could not have children. They were gaslighting me to build a legal case. The smoke, the disappearing items, the whispers it was all manufactured to make me look crazy so they could steal my child and replace me with a woman of their own pedigree. I sat there in that coffee shop, surrounded by the murmur of strangers, and I felt something inside me die. The Mallory who wanted to be a good wife, who wanted to please her mother-in-law, who doubted her own sanity. She was gone. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a terrifying, absolute stillness settle over me. It was the sensation of the ocean receding from the shore, the deceptive calm before a tsunami hits land. They wanted a crazy woman. No. They had just awakened a director, and I was about to script the most tragic ending their little dynasty had ever seen. I wasted absolutely zero time. I dialed Dax immediately. He was my foster brother, the only real family I had left, and fortunately for me, he was a certified ethical hacker who usually spent his days testing security systems for banks. I sent him the video file of Constance in the nursery without a word of context. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mal. Dax's voice was low, vibrating with a dangerous kind of quiet. Tell me I am not seeing what I think I am seeing. Tell me that witch isn't blowing smoke into my nephew's face. I need everything, Dax, I said, my voice steady. I need bank accounts, emails, deleted texts, and GPS history. I need to know how deep the rot goes. I need a bridge, he replied instantly, shifting into professional mode. Is Preston logged into anything on the home Wi-Fi that isn't his work laptop? Their corporate firewalls are tough, but personal devices are usually Swiss cheese. I walked over to the nursery. The white noise machine was controlled by an old iPad that Preston insisted on keeping there. He used it to play lullabies, but I knew he also used it to check his stocks during late-night feedings. I flipped it over and read the passcode I had memorized months ago. I am in. I told Dax. He is logged into his primary cloud account on the nursery iPad. He never logs out. Got it. Give me 10 minutes. It took him 8. When Dax called back, he did not sound angry anymore. He sounded impressed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. We stayed on the line as he screen shared his findings to my laptop. The first thing we unraveled was the money trail. It was not just Preston hiding assets. It was Constance bankrolling the affair. There was a wire transfer from the Vantage Point Family Trust dated 3 weeks ago. The amount was $850,000. Look at the recipient, Dax said. It was a real estate holding company in Manhattan. A quick cross-reference showed the down payment on a penthouse apartment in Tribeca. The deed was not in Preston's name, nor Constance's. It was in the name of Serafina Vander Woodson. Constance had bought a love nest for her son's mistress using family money that technically belonged to my son's inheritance. We moved to the travel logs. Preston had claimed he was in Chicago for 4 days last month handling a supply chain crisis. The credit card statements painted a different picture. There were charges for 2 first-class tickets to Cabo San Lucas and a 3-night stay at a 5-star resort costing $12,000. He wasn't fighting a crisis, I muttered, staring at the screen. He was drinking margaritas. It gets worse. Mal, Dax warned, his voice hesitant. I found a group chat. It is archived, but I restored it. The chat was named The Perfect Family Upcoming. The members were Preston, Constance, and Serafina. I forced myself to read the log. It was a dossier of cruelty. They dissected my appearance with surgical precision. Did you see that dress she wore to the gala Serafina had typed? She looks like a dairy cow that has been put out to pasture. You poor thing. Preston, don't worry, darling, Constance had replied. She is just a placeholder. She has the breeding of a stray dog. Once we have Leo, we will scrub her peasant influence out of him. I can't wait to be done with her. Preston had written, every time she touches me, I have to close my eyes and think of you. Fina. It is suffocating. I felt a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. I did not feel sad. The part of me that could feel sadness had been incinerated. I was pure logic now. Download it all, I commanded. Every screenshot, every audio file, every bank statement. Put it on a drive that is completely air-gapped from their system. Already done. Dax said, What is the play? Mal, do we go to the police now? No, I said. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The date was circled in red ink. We have a deadline. Leo's 6-month birthday party is in 2 weeks. It is going to be the social event of the season. I opened a new document on my laptop. I typed the words Final Cut at the top of the page. I am going to make a movie. Dax, I said, and I need you to help me set up the premiere. The next morning, I poured my coffee and swallowed a pill. It looked exactly like the heavy sedative Preston's concierge doctor had prescribed to calm my hysteria, but it was actually just a folic acid supplement I had swapped into the bottle. I turned to face my husband and mother-in-law, pasting a fragile, apologetic smile on my face. "I have been thinking," I said, keeping my voice soft and unsure. I think you were right. About the smoke. It must have been my imagination." Constance lowered her teacup. A triumphant gleam sparked in her eyes. "Well, it takes a big person to admit when they are unwell. Mallory, I am just glad the medication is finally working. It is. I lied. I want to make it up to you. I know I have been difficult. Constance, I think you should organize Leo's 6-month party, a real Hamptons affair. I clearly do not have the capacity to handle it right now." Constance practically preened. The idea of controlling the event, of parading her grandson around while I faded into the background, was irresistible to her. She took the bait so hard she nearly choked on it. Her guard dropped almost instantly. Later that afternoon, I saw her light a cigarette on the patio while Leo was in his stroller just 10 feet away. She did not even bother to hide it behind the hydrangeas this time. She thought I was too medicated to notice, but I was not done. I needed all the players on the stage. At dinner, I pushed the food around my plate and looked at Preston. "I was thinking about the nursery," I said. "It feels so drab. Maybe we could get professional help, Constance. Didn't you say your friend's daughter? Serafina is an interior designer. Maybe we could invite her to the party. She could look at the room then." The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. Then Preston and Constance exchanged a look. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. They thought I was the stupidest woman alive. They thought I was inviting my husband's mistress into our home to redecorate the room of the child she intended to steal. That is a thoughtful idea. "Mallory," Preston said, though his voice cracked slightly, "I think Serafina would love to help. I will call her," Constance added quickly, hiding her smirk behind a napkin, while they were busy congratulating themselves on their brilliance. I was busy turning their home into a listening post. I waited until they were in the solarium discussing the guest list, and I taped a high-sensitivity voice recorder under the heavy oak dining table. I slipped another one under the passenger seat of Preston's Tesla while pretending to look for a lost pacifier. The recordings I got the next day confirmed everything. They were already liquidating joint stocks to move cash into offshore accounts. I took those recordings to the city. I did not go to a therapist. I went to the office of Silas Thorne, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state, a man who had been waiting 20 years to stick a knife into the Vantage Point legal team. We spent 4 hours drafting a blindside divorce petition and an emergency motion for sole custody. "You have them," Silas told me, looking at the evidence with professional awe. "If we drop this at the right moment, they won't just lose the custody battle, they will lose everything." Returning home was the hardest part. Lying in bed that night, I felt the mattress dip as Preston climbed in beside me. The man who was planning to declare me insane. The man who was stealing my future. He reached out to touch my waist, and my skin crawled. It took every ounce of my acting ability not to vomit. "Not tonight. Preston," I whispered, pulling away. "I am just so tired from the pills. I feel so heavy." "Fine," he muttered, turning his back to me. He was probably texting Serafina. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I was not tired. I was wide awake, and I was counting down the hours until the show began. 1 week before the main event, Constance invited Serafina over for dinner to ostensibly discuss the nursery renovations. I played my role to perfection. I wore a shapeless gray dress, kept my head down, and served them roast chicken like a hired hand while they sat at the head of the table. Serafina was in her element. She ran a manicured hand over the dining chair and offered a tight, pitying smile. "The vibe in here is just so Heavy, Serafina said, glancing at Preston. It feels a bit dated, doesn't it? I think we need to rip everything out and start fresh. Make it more elegant. I completely agree, Preston said, his eyes lingering on her neckline rather than the interior design. We need a fresh start. I cleared the plates silently. While I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, I checked the feed from the living room camera on my phone. Constance was holding a velvet box. She opened it to reveal the Vander Woodson emerald necklace, a piece of jewelry worth more than my parents' entire house. I was saving this for a special occasion, Constance told Serafina, her voice low. I always said this would belong to my true daughter-in-law. Since you are practically family already, I want you to wear it to the party next week. Oh, Connie, Serafina gasped. It is breathtaking. I will wear it with pride. They were divvying up my life while I was still living in it. Later that evening, Serafina went to the guest suite to freshen up. The moment I heard the shower running, I slipped into the room. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I rifled through her designer handbag until my fingers brushed against leather. I pulled out her passport and a folded itinerary. I snapped photos of everything. They had booked 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives. The departure date was exactly 2 days after Leo's party. They were so confident that I would be kicked out and broken by then that they had already planned their victory lap. I returned to my room just as a secure message came through from Dax. The subject line was simply the nuke. I put in my earbuds. It was a video file recovered from a deleted cloud backup. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. In the video, Preston was pacing around the study, looking frantic. I had to do it. Mom, Preston said in the recording. The margin call was coming. I forged Mallory's signature on the second mortgage papers. The bank thinks she consented to leverage the house. You are a fool, Preston, Constance's voice replied. But, well, if she is declared mentally incompetent, the signature won't matter. We will say she signed it during a lucid moment or that she forgot. Just make sure the notary keeps his mouth shut. I sat back, the blood roaring in my ears. This was not just grounds for divorce. Forging a spouse's signature on a mortgage document was bank fraud. It was a felony. It was prison time. With this, Preston would not just lose custody, he would lose his freedom. I spent the next 3 nights in my makeshift editing bay, crafting the most important film of my career. I titled the project The Truth About Grandma's Love. I worked with the precision of a surgeon. I took clips of Leo laughing and overlaid them with soft, angelic music. Then, using a jagged jump cut technique, I spliced in the footage of Constance blowing smoke into his crib. I mixed the audio of Preston's sweet public speeches with the recording of him admitting to the felony fraud. The contrast was grotesque. It was perfect. On the morning of the party, while the caterers were setting up tents on the lawn, I went into the ballroom. I accessed the main AV control unit. I hardwired my laptop directly into the system and set up a bypass protocol. I locked the projector and the surround sound system with a biometric encryption key that only I possessed. I checked the levels. I checked the brightness. I imagined the faces of the 100 guests who would be filling this room in a few hours. Check. 1, 2. I whispered into the microphone. My voice echoed through the empty hall, powerful and clear. There would be no technical difficulties tonight. Once I hit play, nothing on earth would stop the show until the credits rolled. The day of the party, the estate looked less like a family home and more like a film set designed to intimidate poor people. The lawn was a sea of imported white hydrangeas and peonies, arranged in arches that cost more than most people earned in a year. A string quartet played Mozart near the fountain, providing a polite soundtrack to the gathering of 100 of the Hamptons' most elite socialites. Constance was in her glory. She wore a floor-length silver gown that shimmered like fish scales, carrying Leo around like a trophy she had won at a state fair. She accepted compliments with a practiced fake humility, cooing over my son while carefully angling him so his drool would not touch her sequins. I watched from the balcony as she handed Leo off to a nanny and slipped behind a large trellis covered in ivy. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in. Even on her grandson's big day, she could not help herself. She lit a cigarette, took 3 frantic drags, and then waved her hand to disperse the smoke before popping a breath mint. I hit stop on the recording. That was just B-roll footage for the main feature. Then Serafina arrived. She swept in wearing a dress that was technically appropriate but cut low enough to signal her intentions to anyone paying attention. Constance greeted her with a kiss on both cheeks, introducing her loudly to the wife of a senator. "This is Serafina," Constance announced, her voice carrying over the music. "A dear, dear friend of the family. She has been an absolute angel helping us with the house." The guests nodded and smiled, oblivious to the fact that the angel was currently wearing the Vander Woodsen emeralds around her neck and sleeping with the host. I turned back to my room and looked at the dress laid out on the bed. It was the one Constance had selected for me, a pale beige chiffon number that would wash out my complexion and make me blend into the wallpaper. I picked it up and dropped it into the trash can. I pulled my own choice from the back of the closet. It was crimson red, silk, and tailored to fit like a second skin. It was not the dress of a tired postpartum mother. It was the dress of a woman who was about to burn the house down. When I descended the grand staircase, the conversation in the foyer actually stopped. I saw Preston's jaw tighten. He looked at me not with desire, but with irritation. I was deviating from the script. I was supposed to be the ghost. Instead, I was the flame. Preston recovered quickly. He stepped onto the small raised platform where the microphone stood. He looked at the picture of the young, successful CEO. The partners from Vantage Point Logistics were standing in the front row, holding glasses of champagne, nodding approvingly at their golden boy. "Thank you all for coming," Preston said, his voice thick with performative emotion. "Family is, well, it is the bedrock of everything we do, everything I build. I build for my son. Leo." My smartwatch buzzed against my wrist. It was a notification from Dax. He was mirroring Preston's phone screen to my watch in real time. I looked down at my wrist while Preston droned on about integrity. A text message had just been sent from Preston to Serafina. "God, she looks ridiculous in that red dress. Can't wait to get this over with and get you alone in the pool house. Lose the necklace later. I want to see you wearing nothing but that." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I walked up to the platform as the applause for his speech died down. I placed a hand on his arm. He flinched slightly, but kept his smile fixed for the audience. "Darling," I whispered, leaning in so my lips brushed his ear, "I have a surprise for you and your mother, a special anniversary gift." I made a little film for Leo. Preston let out a short, relieved breath. He thought it was just a montage of baby photos. He thought I was finally playing the doting. "Stupid wife. That sounds wonderful." "Mallory," he said into the microphone. He gestured to the band leader to stop the music. "Everyone, please. My wife has prepared a special video to celebrate Leo's first 6 months. Let's turn our attention to the main screen." The lights in the garden dimmed. The massive 200-inch projection screen descended from the rigging set up near the patio. The guests turned, faces expectant, holding their crystal glasses. Constance stood next to Serafina, looking bored but polite. Preston stepped down and stood beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. "Make it quick," he hissed under his breath, his smile never wavering. "Oh, don't worry." "Preston," I replied, my voice steady and loud enough for him to hear clearly. "It is a short film. But I think you will find the plot twists unforgettable." I signaled the projectionist. The screen flickered to life. The trap was sprung. The garden plunged into darkness. The only light came from the massive cinematic screen that dominated the lawn. The title card faded in with an elegant, curling font, "The Truth About Grandma's Love." Soft, orchestral violins began to swell. The first few clips were exactly what the audience expected. There was Leo in his high chair, his face smeared with mashed peas. There was Leo gripping my finger with his tiny hand. The guests let out a collective, cooing sigh. I saw Constance smile, a smug, satisfied expression that said she had won. Then the music distorted. It was a violent, ugly sound, like a radio being smashed against a wall. The screen seized with digital static before cutting sharply to high-contrast black and white footage. The angle was high, looking down into the crib. Constance appeared on the screen. She was not smiling. She was leaning over my sleeping son, a lit cigarette dangling from her lips. The smoke curled down, thick and gray, filling the crib. The surround sound system, which I had calibrated to maximum volume, broadcast her voice with terrifying clarity. "This little bitch is so stupid," the digital Constance sneered, her voice echoing off the garden walls. "She thinks I quit smoking. I will just puff a little more, get the boy coughing, then we can blame it on her not knowing how to clean the dust." The silence that fell over the garden was absolute. It was shattered a second later by the sound of glass breaking. Constance's hand had gone limp. Her crystal glass of vintage Pinot Noir hit the white marble patio, exploding outward. The red wine splattered across the hem of her silver dress like a fresh arterial spray. "Oh my God," someone whispered in the darkness. But I was not done. The screen flashed again. A jump cut. Now we were in the kitchen. The timestamp in the corner read 2 weeks ago. Preston was there. He was pressing Serafina up against the granite island. They were kissing with a hunger that was repulsive to watch. Then Preston pulled back, breathless. "I got the money," Preston said on the screen. "I forged her signature on the second mortgage papers this morning. The bank bought it. Once the cash clears, I am going to kick her out to the curb." "What about the custody?" Serafina asked, running her hands through his hair. "Don't worry," Preston laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "You just remember to act your part. We are going to paint her as unstable. By the time I am done gaslighting her, she won't even know her own name." A gasp rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. The partners from Vantage Point Logistics were no longer drinking their champagne. They were staring at the screen with mouths hanging open. Preston froze. For a heartbeat, he just stared at his own image, unable to comprehend that his private villainy was being broadcast to the entire Hamptons social register. Then the realization hit him. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off, right now." He lunged toward the projector stand, his face twisted in a mask of panic. He grabbed the thick power cable and ripped it from the socket. The main screen went dark. "It's a lie," Preston yelled, turning to the crowd, sweat glistening on his forehead. It is a deep fake. She made it up, but he had forgotten about the house." Suddenly, the 60-inch television mounted on the patio wall flickered to life. Then the one inside the living room, visible through the French doors. Then the screens in the pool house. Dax had triggered the failsafe. The video restarted from the beginning, playing in a synchronized loop on every single screen on the property. "This little bitch is so stupid." Constance's voice boomed again, coming from everywhere at once. Preston looked around wildly, realizing he was surrounded by his own sins. I stood on the platform, the red dress flowing around me like armor, and I finally allowed myself to smile. The video on the screens shifted to a close-up of the emerald necklace resting against Serafina's skin. Then, with a brutal cut, it switched to a recording of Constance sitting in her solarium just 3 days prior. Her voice rang out, crisp and venomous, over the terrified silence of the garden. "I honestly dread having the board of directors here," the recorded Constance said, swirling her tea, "especially the Millers. They are such tasteless, new money trash. I feel like I need to disinfect the silverware after they leave. In the real world, Robert Miller, the senior partner at Vantage Point who held the keys to Preston's career, turned a shade of violet I had never seen on a human being. His wife, a woman who had donated $500,000 to Constance's favorite charity last year, looked at my mother-in-law with a gaze of cold, absolute loathing. The air in the garden thickened with the smoke of 100 burning bridges. Serafina realized the game was up. She tried to flee. She spun around on her 6-inch stilettos, aiming for the side gate, but panic made her clumsy. Her heel caught in the heavy fabric of her gown. She went down hard, sprawling face first onto the manicured grass in a tangle of limbs and shame. Not a single person moved to help her. I stepped back up to the microphone. I felt a strange, icy calm. I was no longer the victim. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and amplified across the lawn. "What you are seeing is not just infidelity. It is the systematic abuse of a mother and her child. This is the reason I have filed for immediate divorce and am seeking sole custody of my son." I gestured to the screen, where Dax had replaced the video feed with high-resolution images of the forged documents. The man standing there, my husband, forged my signature to secure a second mortgage on our home to cover his bad investments, I announced, pointing a finger at Preston. And his mother, the esteemed Constance, has been laundering money from the family trust to hide his insolvency and fund his mistress's lifestyle. It is all there. Every cent. Preston looked like a trapped animal. He lunged toward the stage, his eyes wide and manic. "You are a liar," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. You are crazy. You staged all of this. Don't look at it, but nobody was looking away. The evidence was 60 feet high and glowing in high definition. His denial was pathetic against the weight of the truth. Then came the sound that sealed their fate. Sirens wailing in the distance, growing louder by the second. Blue and red lights began to flash against the high hedges of the estate. I had called the police 30 minutes ago to report felony bank fraud and child endangerment. I looked at Constance. She was clutching her chest, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This was not a performance. She looked around the circle of her peers, the socialites, the partners, the people she had spent 40 years impressing, and she saw only disgust. She saw the one thing she feared more than death, social expulsion. She gasped for air, her face turning a sickly gray as the reality of her total destruction crushed the breath out of her lungs. The police officers did not need much explanation. Dax had already emailed a zip file containing the forged digital signatures, the bank transfer logs, and the metadata of the fraud directly to the Economic Crimes Division. They bypassed the stunned guests and walked straight to Preston. When they read him his rights, he did not fight. He slumped, his expensive Italian suit looking suddenly like a costume that did not fit. I walked up to him as the officer tightened the cuffs. I pulled a thick manila envelope from my clutch. "Preston," I said, my voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "These are the divorce papers. They grant me full legal and physical custody. They also waive your right to contest the division of assets. I won't sign that," he stammered, sweat dripping down his nose. "My lawyer will." "You will," I interrupted, staring him down. "If you sign it right now, before you get into that squad car, I might tell the district attorney that you were coerced by your mother. It might shave a year or 2 off your sentence. If you don't sign, I hand over the rest of the hard drive which contains the embezzlement records from 3 years ago." It was a lie. I had already handed over everything, but Preston was a coward, and cowards always look for the easiest way out. He looked at the officers, then at the pen I held out. With shaking hands, he scribbled his name on the hood of the police cruiser. It was the most expensive autograph he would ever give. A few yards away, The social slaughter of Serafina was in full swing. Mrs. Miller, the wife of the board chairman, stood over the fallen mistress like a tower of judgment. "Do not bother coming to the office on Monday." "Serafina—" "Mrs. Miller said, her voice dripping with ice, "Your contract for the lobby renovation is terminated, and I will make sure no one in this zip code ever hires you to design a doghouse, let alone a home." Serafina sobbed into the grass, but the circle of women just tightened their shawls and turned their backs. She had ceased to exist to them. I walked into the house one last time. I went to the nursery, picked up Leo, and grabbed the diaper bag I had packed that morning. I did not look back at the room where my son had been poisoned by his own grandmother. I walked out the front door, down the marble steps, past the ruined party. Dax was waiting in the driveway, the engine of his SUV running. Constance broke through the police line. She looked deranged. Her hair was coming loose, her silver dress stained with wine, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed my arm with a grip of desperation. "Mallory, you cannot take him," she shrieked, clawing at me. "He is a Vanderwoodson. He is my grandson. Please." "He is all I have left." I stopped. I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her tear-streaked face. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just the clarity of a judge passing a final sentence. "You had a choice. Constance," I said. "You chose your cigarettes. You chose your pride. You chose the smoke instead of your grandson." I pulled my arm free, got into the car, and locked the door. As we drove away, I saw her collapse onto the gravel driveway, screaming at the taillights as the police lights washed over her. By the time we reached the highway, the video of the party had already hit the internet. One of the catering staff had live-streamed the entire confrontation. It had 2 million views before midnight. The hashtag Grandma from Hell was trending worldwide. The fallout was swift and mathematical. On Monday morning, when the markets opened, Vantage Point Logistics stock did not just dip, it plummeted. The board fired Preston in an emergency meeting at 9 o'clock. By noon, they had voted to remove Constance from all honorary positions to distance the brand from the scandal. But the social execution was worse. The Hamptons Ladies Club sent Constance a formal letter revoking her membership due to conduct unbecoming. Her phone stopped ringing. Her brunch invitations dried up. She was left alone in that massive, smoke-filled mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture and the absolute silence of a life that had burned to the ground. It has been 6 months since I burned the Vantage Point dynasty to the ground, and the view from my new office in Manhattan has never looked clearer. I am no longer just a filmmaker or a victim. I am the CEO of my own life. The fallout was absolute. The courts were not kind to Preston. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence of fraud, he was forced to accept a plea deal to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. He is currently serving 3 years of probation and completing 2,000 hours of community service. The last time I saw him, he was wearing a bright orange vest, picking up trash on the side of the Jersey Turnpike. He lost his job, his reputation, and his trust fund. He now lives in a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Queens, with no air conditioning. Constance fared even worse. To pay back the stolen funds to the family trust and cover Preston's massive legal fees, she was forced to sell the East Hampton estate. The home she had ruled like a queen was sold to a tech billionaire who plans to bulldoze it and build a modern glass box. Constance now resides in a high-end assisted living facility upstate. It is expensive, but it is lonely. The nurses tell me she spends her days staring out the window, waiting for visitors who never come. The society friends she valued so highly abandoned her the moment her checkbook dried up. As for me, the divorce was finalized last week. I was awarded full legal and physical custody of Leo, along with a settlement of $5 million from the liquidation of the Vanderwoodson assets. The judge called Preston's behavior reprehensible and granted a permanent restraining order. Serafina, true to her nature, did not stick around for the downfall. She dumped Preston the very same day he lost his job. She is currently dating an oil tycoon in Texas, but the internet never forgets. A simple Google search of her name pulls up thousands of forum posts labeling her a homewrecker and a gold digger. She might be wearing diamonds, but she is walking around with a target on her back. I decided to put the settlement money to good use. I founded a nonprofit organization called the Clear View Foundation. We provide top-tier legal aid and private investigators for women who are being financially manipulated or gaslighted by their partners. I am using my skills as a documentarian to help other mothers gather the evidence they need to fight back. I turned away from the window and looked at the baby monitor on my desk. Leo is 1 year old now. He is sleeping soundly in his crib in the next room. The air around him is crisp, purified, and smells only of lavender and safety. There is no smoke here. There are no secrets. My computer pinged with a notification. It was an email from an unknown address, but the subject line gave it away. Please, Mal. I just want to see him. It was Preston. He was begging. I did not feel a pang of guilt. I did not feel a flicker of hesitation. I moved my cursor over the trash icon and clicked once. Then, I right-clicked the sender address and selected block permanently. I picked up my coffee, took a long, satisfying sip, and whispered into the quiet room. Don't ever mess with a mother. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment down below and let's chat. If you enjoyed watching Justice Be Served, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach even more people who need to hear it.